Today we are having conversation with Rob Smedley, who is known for his work at Formula One and Ferrari in terms of performance management and motorsports. He's also the proud recipient of doctorate at Teesside University. He's now the CEO and founder of Smedley Group, a technology powerhouse that looks at visualizations as well as simulations that can help address performance gaps in motorsports. So without further ado, let's welcome Rob. Rob.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Glad to be here and thank you for taking out time to be a guest on our show.
Pleasure.
Lovely. Fantastic. Rob, to start with, so you started as a Formula One race engineer at Formula One, and then you also later on worked as the director of data systems at Formula One, right? So give me a reality check of how is it working at Formula One. So we talk about glamour and fame and international trips, all those sort of things, but then we also talk about pressure of winning races. We also talk about long working hours. So can you give us a reality check of how is it working at Formula One?
Yeah, I mean, the glamour, as you called it, that wears off very quickly. If that's why you've come into Formula One, you're in the wrong sport. So I don't think that it's like anything, right? Like, I've got friends who are in the film industry, the TV industry, the music industry, sport. Anything with a superficial glamour on the outside, when you're on the inside, is very, very different. So Formula One as a sport, like all of those other industries that I've just mentioned, they're very competitive. They can be brutal at times. The pressure is immense to deliver, and the higher you kind of go up the greasy pole, the pressure becomes more and more. Especially if you've got if you're known by the fans, then the pressure is more. I always describe my position, my latter positions in Formula One teams like a football manager, right? You're kind of there to coalesce the whole thing together, but you know that if it doesn't go right, it'll be your head on the chopping block. But that was something that it's something that's never particularly bothered me. I think my brain works in a way that I kind of just get past all of that and don't really care about it. And I'm much more driven. The thing that takes me back to keeps me in Formula One, has kept me in it for all these years, is I think the levels of excellence that you're trying to attain. That the pressure to achieve ever more. And I think for me, personally, I think you'll find this with all of the successful people in industries like Formula One. External pressure is nothing like the internal pressure that you put on yourself. So I put a massive amount of pressure on myself. I still do, to deliver. And that doesn't always make you a good leader, actually, because you never. I get this now in my companies that I'm always accused of never celebrating success, and I think that it's not so much that I don't celebrate success. Well, it is that I don't celebrate success, but it's I don't care about success, right? Because success is in the moment, and what I care about is what's in front of me, and what we can achieve tomorrow, not what we've achieved today. If we've hit our targets and won a race or got pole position or won a world championship today, that's all great, right? But that's done now. That moment's gone, right? Now let's think about the next thing. How are we going to achieve the next thing? So I think that it conditions you to have that mindset very much, and I think if you're up for that and you enjoy working in a team and having that relentless, what I would call a positive pressure, because pressure can be negative as well, but having that positive pressure, then Formula One is a great industry. It's the perfect industry for me, because as well, if you have a competitive streak in you, I have to temper now in my middle age, like how competitive I am. I'm awful, but trying to keep that under control. but again, all of them things line up. All of the things line up so that it's a great sport. But the glamour itself, like, you know, it's a nonsense. Like, nobody cares. It's gone. But you see a lot of people come into this sport because they watch it on, you know, a lot of young guys will come into it. You know, women and men from like university age, they'll think, oh, you know, Formula One's all I ever want to do. And it's because, and I've seen this now, this wasn't how I was, but you see that they kind of see Formula One from what they watch on a Sunday afternoon, and they think, oh, that's great, you know, the yachts and the supermodels and the champagne and all of this nonsense. And very, very quickly you get a reality check that it's nothing like that. It's just grind. It's like building any business, right? It's like any kind of success. You know, whether it's in heavy engineering or, you know, you're sending rockets to the moon, you are building a company like Tesla, or you're trying to win Formula One World Championships. It's just grind. It's just really, really hard work, with a lot of, you know, high functioning, high achieving people. So
fantastic.
if you can stand that type of environment, it's a good industry for you.
Fantastic. There was a fantastic landscape in terms of, you know, what happens on screen, as you said, and what happens on the tracks and behind the tracks as well. So that's a good reality check. How did this all start? Like, so in terms of, you know, how did you enter into this world of automotive engineering and motorsports? Like, what was the spark? You know, I mean, this is pushing a rewind button on your journey. So how did it all start? Was there a spark, like, when you look back?
Totally, it was a moment of, it was absolutely a single moment of inspiration, which was when I was around about 11. So I went to school just down the road here, and the well-trodden path, if you did well at school, was probably you would go and work in British Steel, in the design office or something like that. And when I was about 10, 11 years old, my dad used to watch Formula One on the TV. And for, you know, if you look at how popular Formula One is now, right, there's 1.7 billion fans worldwide, right? So that's quite a big percentage of the world's population, like Formula One.
Vertical growth, yeah?
Yeah, it's insane. If you look back then, in the 80s, right, people from Middlesbrough didn't really watch Formula One. You know, it had all the problems that it's still got now. It was football. I mean, I'm still a massive, like, for my sins, and I've had decades now of misery, I'm still a massive Middlesbrough fan, and always will be. But, you know, football was definitely my sport then, and still is. But my dad used to watch Formula One on the TV, and I used to think, oh my God, that looks so dull. It looks terrible. And he said to me, do you want to come to the British Grand Prix? So anyway, long story short, we went to the British Grand Prix, and I was just blown away by it. I just thought, oh my God, you know, I only went along with him to kind of keep him company. I thought it was going to be the most boring weekend of my life. And it wasn't. It was brilliant, and I wanted to get up close to the cars. You know, it wasn't so much the drivers or anything like that attracted me. It was the cars. You know, these visceral things. They're like fighter jets, right? That go, you know, that travel around a 5 kilometer circuit, inches from the ground. And I just saw these things, and I thought, these are just, you know, these are unbelievable. And at that point, it was a spark that I wanted to be an engineer. You know, I wanted to work on the cars. I didn't know anything about engineering. I didn't know anything about design or aerodynamics or thermodynamics or fluid dynamics, any of that stuff. But I just knew that I wanted to somehow get close to these cars. Again, it wasn't so much the glamour or the drivers or any of that stuff. It was the cars that always, you know, interested me. And then, you know, I kind of found my feet. I went sixth form down the road here. Then I went to university and read mechanical engineering, and I come out of there, and I pretty much, I pretty much went straight into motorsports. So I guess I was pretty lucky. And, you know, I'd only been working for about a year or whatever. Then I went into Formula One. So I went into a team called Stewart Grand Prix, which is now the Red Bull team. It got bought by Red Bull back in about 2005. So I worked for them first of all, then I went to work for Eddie Jordan, which is a whole nother podcast in itself. And then I was at Ferrari for 11 years, and then finally Williams. And at that point, I kind of
Williams Racing, yeah.
Williams Grand Prix engineering, yeah. So I had a very long career with the teams, and then kind of got to the end of that and decided that that was quite enough of that. You know, I was very lucky because I got into Formula One at a very young age, and not only did I get in a very young age, I also you know, I was, for whatever reason, I've still got no idea to this day, but they promoted me into senior positions quite early and kept doing it as well. I think they were kind of just trying to get me out of the way of causing mayhem and harm. But anyway, what happened was I got promoted. So I'd spent a long time as a senior engineer and then a senior manager. You know, in Formula One, and then, you know, I decided that I wanted to do something different, and hence why. But I wanted to use all of those skills and transfer it to something else. So this is where we're at now.
That's fascinating. Reflecting on your career so far, I mean, it's fantastic in terms of, I mean, the work that you're mentioning at Formula One and Ferrari and Williams that you're talking about. Can you think of a specific race or a technical breakthrough where you felt that, you know, this is what I do and this is what I do and this is why I do it, you know, the calling perspective that, you know, you've had numerous proud moments, right? But any particular specific race or something that you could...
Well, I mean, I went into Formula One in 1997. I was still a baby, to be honest, and when I look at, like, kind of how the teams were structured then, we were very, very small, and when I went into it, I thought it would be very much about, like, the big moments, and, you know, suddenly somebody finds something and it's half a second or a second of lap time on the car. And my realization was, come very, very quickly into it, when basically the rule changes. There was a rule change coming up in the year 1999, I think it was. And it allowed for active control of certain elements of the vehicle. So, like, what you would know as, like, power steering or ABS, you know, anti-locking braking system. And we, you know, if you look at vehicle dynamics teams now or vehicle dynamics groups in a Formula One team, you know, there'll be 100, 150 people. At that point, we were 3 people. And so we kind of had understood that not only did it allow the active vehicle controls, which were explicitly written, but there was also a lot of other stuff that they hadn't written, but this opened up. So you could have active stability control, for example. So when the car gets, you know, out of shape, you could you could stabilize it through the differential and the braking system. You could have anti-locking brakes. You could have fully automatic upshift gearboxes, fully automatic downshift gearboxes, effectively ABS systems. I mean, we got to the point where we were controlling the car from the pit wall. And what I understood about Formula One at that point was that there wasn't any massive breakthrough. It was three of us plus 2 contractors working over winter months, and I don't think, like, I hardly ever saw the daylight. Over about a 4-month period of writing code, so writing all the equations and the algorithms, then transferring that into code, putting it into the embedded code into the ECU, going and testing it over the road at Silverstone to see if it worked, coming back, rewriting the code, going back the next day, doing that, and we did that all the way up to the Australian Grand Prix, and it was just like 4 or 5 months of relentless grind. And we had a really quick car. You know, we were the team that kind of stole the march with all of that electronics stability stuff, and that kind of hit home to me that there isn't, like, there's never a single moment, and it's the same in business, right? Because I always say to my team now, you know, the guys who run, you know, the businesses, I always say, you know, ideas are nothing, execution is everything, right? So if you're not prepared to get down and execute at the highest level, whatever idea you've got, forget it. It doesn't matter. And I think that's what I learned very early on in this industry, was that you had to be able to execute. So, you know, the ideas that we had, going back to that, you know, 1999, about, you know, all of the various active control systems that we were going to put on the car. The ideas that we had were all great, but it was just an incredible amount of hard work and grind to actually get them to come to reality. And I think that's probably, you know, the big difference, that, you know, when you look for Formula One from the outside, people always ask me, oh, what is it that Red Bull do? Why have Red Bull got a good car? And the answer is, there's probably about 10,000 things that they're doing well. There's not one single thing, because it's about marginal gains. So, you know, that's what that's very much the nature of Formula One, and it was good to learn that very early on as well. It was good to learn that you know, getting into work at 7 o'clock in the morning and leaving at 11 is quite normal.
In terms of marginal gains, as you said, I mean, I completely agree with you on the point, you know, in terms of the power of execution. We do talk about that in business. So there's an element of planning, but there's also an element of execution, and it's an art and science both when we talk about that. And you talked about multiple factors, so it's not just one thing, like Red Bull thing that you mentioned. So it's not one factor, one indicator that, you know, as a leading indicator. So there's bits and pieces that come together as a puzzle. In terms of the philosophy of tiny improvements, small changes, do you believe that works very well for Formula One? I mean, certainly that's what you're talking about, but do you think that, you know, I understand it's split seconds decisions that are made, right, on the, I know, with the drivers and, you know, the whole working on this. So, but do you believe that these tiny improvements, they have a significant impact?
Yeah, it's all about marginal gains. You know, for Formula One, there's no, you know, you look at Formula One now, and you've got Red Bull out the front, and then you've got Ferrari, Mercedes, on some days Aston Martin, on some days McLaren, you know, not far behind. Then you've got the rest of the midfield. Then you've got, you know, a couple of teams who are always at the back. Mm-hmm. The reality is, there are no bad teams, right? So even these guys at the back who look relatively, you know, really, you know, almost, you know, as a joke compared to Red Bull, right? Mm-hmm. The reality is, when you get inside that team, mm-hmm. and you look at how professional they are, and you look at, you know, how well funded they are, how well they execute, you understand that there are no bad teams, right? So there's no like low-hanging fruit. It's not easy to kind of go into a team at the back of the grid and suddenly get them to the front of the grid because they're just a bunch of idiots. It's just not true, right? They're all high-functioning, high-achieving individuals that work very well as a team. They're just missing that final 1-2% compared to a team that runs at the front. So because of that, there's no, you know, there's this notion of a big gain just around the corner isn't really, it's just not the reality. The reality is, it's just about tiny marginal gains. So you're constantly looking for, you know, I'm going to make a change on the car, I'm going to bring some development, and it might be worth, like, you know, it might be worth 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 milliseconds. You know, you'll make design changes for 8 milliseconds per lap, right? So think about that. And but when you add all these things up, if you've got 10 things that are worth 5 milliseconds, 10 things is then worth 50 milliseconds, and 50 milliseconds is a big chunk in Formula One. You know, that can be the difference between 1, 2, 3 positions on the grid. Indeed. So of course, you know, the teams are constantly working towards all these marginal gains, but what that brings you is, it brings you into the realms then, as you become more senior, is that, you know, all of these different subgroups are working on finding their tiny marginal gains. But what you've got to do as kind of the orchestra, as the conductor of the orchestra, is you've got to make sure that what this team is doing over here to find, you know, 10 milliseconds is not going to harm the team over here, and, you know, and make their 10 milliseconds minus 10 milliseconds or something, so you end up in a net zero position. So you've got to kind of constantly find these trades between all the various different teams within your group, so that you can come out with the best compromise. You know, it's always about compromise. You've always got to make a compromise, and it's the same. That's no different in Formula One to any other business, right? You know, there's very rarely, if you sat on something and you say, well, I'm going to do this, and it's just a win-win situation, and it's going to make it's going to make 10% or 20% or 30% improvement to my top line or bottom line to my business, if we're talking about business, then, you know, to be really frank about it, you've been sat with a bunch of idiots running your business for however long, right? So that just doesn't happen. You know, what happens is that, you know, businesses like Formula One teams are run very well, or most of them are. They run very well. So it's then just about these tiny marginal gains, and about orchestrating those tiny marginal gains to get an overall net benefit.
Yeah, I'm enjoying the conversation. I mean, especially the insights that you're talking about from Formula One racing, and, you know, the leadership lessons and management lessons in terms of, you know, those tiny attributes, and then the consequences leading to big consequences and significant gaps, right? Am I right in saying that Formula One is a data-driven sport?
Yes, totally. I think it is undoubtedly the most data-driven sport on the planet, and possibly the most data-driven industry in the world. Yeah, absolutely. I think that we are, you know, no business can ever be, you know, 100% objective. You have to have your natural intelligence that drives decisions as well. But certainly Formula One is extremely data driven, and I think that was my generation when we come into Formula One. You know, back in the mid 90s, I think we were responsible for that, because we come out of it was at the advent now of more prevalent computer science, if you like. You know, just when I finished my degree, and more readily available computer science, and not long after that came the advent of the internet, which allowed for, you know, an even more analytical approach, if you like. You know, the development in compute power, all of those things, and then my generation probably understanding it inherently as well as part of their education, brought that data-driven approach to Formula One. So, you know, when I first started in Formula One, there was probably something like 15 sensors on the car. Now it will run happily, even during a Sunday race, with like 300 sensors on the car. And from that 300 sensors, you know, you're often generating something like 5,000 data channels. You know, 5,000, you know, fused data channels, and then from that you can generate literally, you know, hundreds of thousands of inferred channels. So, you know, what we're always trying to do is we're always trying to measure the unmeasurable, and trying to understand more and more in depth, you know, more and more at first principles, and more in depth at a greater level of detail about the vehicle, the team, whatever it is. So we use data to drive every decision in Formula One. You know, it would be unheard of that somebody would just come and say, it's my opinion that the car shape should look like this, so let's do that. Everything is driven by the very, very simple and clear mission of trying to build a fast Formula One car. And that's the beauty of Formula One for me. You know, that's the thing that keeps me coming back to Formula One, is that, you know, now that I kind of do stuff in the outside world, and even, you know, running my own businesses, I think that it's to have clarity of mission and purpose, and say what your targets and objectives are, is always very difficult, and they're always conflicting, right? Because as a business, you're always trying to make money, but you're always trying to do something else, and that conflicts with something else that you're trying to do over here, right? In Formula One, it's really simple, right? It's just about how fast you can make your Formula One car, and can you make it faster than anybody else? And that means when you've got, you know, the teams are huge now. You know, if you take teams like Mercedes that have the engine team attached to it as well, you know, that's 2,000 women and men all working for a Formula One team. But the reason why it works, and the reason why it's so high performing, is that the mission is so clear, right? There's nothing, nobody cares about anything else. There's no other, you know, there's no opaqueness to the KPIs. There's no conflict anywhere. It's clear. Just make a fast Formula One car, right? That's all. That is your reason for getting out of bed on a morning.
Common single denominator, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that helps you with, building that data-driven culture, and the way you execute upon that data-driven culture as well. Because you can't just do that by, you no longer do that with hand calculations. Yeah. You've got to be able to do that through some very strong, data tool set, and you need a very strong backup in terms of compute power and edge compute and all of that good stuff. So it is a culture of being data driven, and it is very, very objective, and that is something that I very much enjoy, actually, because it keeps you on your toes. You can't just say, in my opinion, I think I'm the cleverest person in the room, I'm going to make this, because someone will come back and go, well, the numbers don't say that, so what do you.
So in terms of the mix of subjectivity and objectivity that you're talking about, so is it okay to say it's a 60% objective, 40% subjective? I mean, in terms, just as a
it's higher than that. If you take the engineering, then it's probably like 90-10. It's 90% objective,
oh my God.
And it's 10% subjectivity. You've got to have the subjectivity. You've got to have your generalists that can make decisions. But those generalists, what you'll find, so when in senior positions that I've held in teams, you need a lot of highly intelligent specialists to be able to back up whatever decision that you're going to make. So if you're going to make a decision about the design direction of the car, whether it's the the mechanical side of the car or the aerodynamic side of the car, you need a lot of data and simulation to be able to back that up. And you need to be constantly measuring, as you're taking steps along whatever development path you're going down, you need to be constantly measuring that and seeing that you're hitting your targets. And if you're not, asking yourself why, and recorrelating models and rebuilding models and going off down different directions and testing that. So it's very, very data driven. It's only about the data. Everything else is kind of just people's opinions. Yeah,
interesting to know that. Personally, Rob, do you like the technical side of this or the competition side of this? Or maybe those are not to the side, that's not the right way to look at it.
I think it's one and the same, to be honest. I mean, I'm a bit of a Luddite when it comes to the compute, in as much that I see that as an enabler. And I know that's a terrible way. There's probably a lot of computer scientists who are going to watch this who you probably think I'm a Philistine, but as a mechanical engineer, as a somebody who's interested in science and data, for me it's about how can we use compute power to enable us to get to the answer faster. Now there's a whole then different industry and area of computer science, including cloud compute and edge compute and whatever, that has to go into that enables and facilitates the simulation aspect of it. So I think one is not successful without the other. But obviously my focus, I'm not a computer science. I'm a mechanical engineer by profession. So my focus is always just on where are the tools, where's the simulation tools, and have I got enough compute power where I can run like 1 million simulations a second or something like that will give me the fastest, most objective answer that I can possibly get in order to make the right decision. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the softer side of this, right? So in terms of the leadership and team dynamics, how do you see the ideal team dynamics, right? So when you talk about the driver and so the car, the machine and man-machine, and then the team that's surrounding. So how do you sketch this ideal team dynamics drawing from the world of the Formula One and Ferrari and the experiences that you've had?
Yeah, I think you've got to, it's high octane as an industry, Formula One. So you can't help but have people with big egos, but the job is to try to get those egos to deflate, to be to be as small as possible, because the real key to success is teamwork. People often, they kind of, especially from the outside in a sport like Formula One, you look on the inside and you've got the more recognised engineers, and I know because I've been through that myself. This particular individual makes a big difference in this particular team. Most of the time it's a nonsense. In fact, all of the time it's a nonsense, right? Because you're in a team of, hundreds, 1,000 people. So actually, as a senior leader within that team, the dynamic is you've just got to create the teamwork where everybody can work together. And everybody has simplicity of mission, simplicity of objectives, where you get rid of the ego that what I'm doing over here is significantly more important than what this person's doing over there. It's all important, right? So you need to act as referee, you need to act as technical expert when it's needed, arbitrator to make sure that you're making all of these trade-offs. But you've also got to have the buy-in of that culture, the team dynamic, as you call it, from all of the individuals as well. So when somebody in my position, for example, has to make a decision that perhaps we're going to take 30% of what you want to do, and 50% or 80% of what somebody else wants to do, because that's the best thing for the team. That in a couple of months' time it'll change, and we'll take your idea in its totality. It's just we're always trying to make the best decision for the team, because it's never about individuals. It's always about what is the mission of the team, and it's always about trying to make a fast Formula One car. Once you let egos get in the way, once you start to let individuals get in the way, you very quickly get found out, because Formula One is brutal in the sense that every 2 weeks you've got to go and show how good you are, right? So you can't hide behind some P&L or some earnings call or anything like that, right? You go and you show how good you are every 2 weeks in front of 1.5 billion people. So you haven't got time to let toxic team dynamics get in the way of stuff. You've just got to all be working for the good of the team, and to make a fast Formula One car. And that, to be honest, is no different in any other business as well. It's just that it moves slower. My experience now of my advanced engineering company in the outside world is we've still got all exactly the same problems. We just move slower than we would in a Formula One team. Mainly because the outside world moves much slower. The pace is significantly slower, but you've still got to have that team dynamic of everybody working towards that single goal and everybody being a team player.
Yeah. And now, as you mentioned that you're a founder and CEO of the Smedley Group. So now running your own company, what are the top key challenges that you're working at? Right, so in contrast with back in time when you're working for Ferrari and Formula One.
Well, it's a different pressure, right? Paying, making sure that dozens and dozens of people, get paid every at the end of every month. That brings about a different pressure altogether. But I think that we're a young business, and we're a fast growing business as well. With lots of different stakeholders and quite a diverse, very diverse portfolio of what we do. So I don't think that there's the challenges aren't that different to what I've had before in Formula One. They're probably nuanced quite differently. Building a business from the ground up. There's certainly stuff that I've had to learn. I was very much ensconced in somebody else's business for 25 years, and then I had to come out and start my own business. So there's a lot of stuff that you kind of have to learn. I think my one piece of advice on that, and maybe it was easier for me because I was a little bit older and had a lot of experience of working, but my one piece of advice on that whole entrepreneur type thing is just try and keep it simple, right? Don't try and do illogical things. Just do simple stuff. Don't overstretch yourself, especially on the backroom basics of a business. You see a lot of businesses that kind of come up and disappear very quickly, and it's usually because the founders were not doing sensible things. to kind of take a step back and think about what you're doing, think about the responsibility that you have to, tens, hundreds of people who you've got to pay their wages every single month, and ensure that you're making all the right decisions for growth.
Yeah, so keep it simple, easier said than done. But again, I like the tagline of your company. I read it somewhere. It says, using Formula One technology to make complex decisions fast, right? So again, we do talk about complex environment and, fast-paced environment and all that pressured decision making that goes on the other side, as well as in terms of entrepreneurship. One final question before we go. In terms of fans' engagement, so how do you see the evolution of motor industry, and especially in terms of attracting newer generations to this? You mentioned about that, back in time when you started, right? So your dad took you there, and it is a spectator sport, but you talked about the massive growth that we have seen. But from here on, right, with all this technology and objectivity that we talked about, and the competition and the evolution that has happened so far, how do you see this whole industry will move forward, and how can we attract the younger generation to this, to the growing evolution of this?
Well, I think that Formula One as a sport, somewhat fortuitously, somewhat designed, is it's finally attracting a younger audience. If you look at things like what everybody knows, like Drive to Survive, the Netflix documentary Drive to Survive, that's how a lot of the younger fans, a lot of new fans are coming into Formula One. In fact, literally hundreds of millions of fans over the last 5 years have come into Formula One through that route. So if you look at the average age of a Formula One fan, it's decreasing every single year. It gets younger. If you look, my favourite stat of all is if you look at the gender split of new fans, it's almost, not quite, but it's almost 50-50, which is incredible, right? If you take Formula One 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, the reality was that it was pale, male and stale, right? Now Formula One is super exciting. So I don't think it's about bringing the new fans in. I don't think we need to attract younger audience. The younger audience is already in. Like I said, there's 1.7 billion fans worldwide who watch Formula One, right? That is an incredible number for a single sport. The challenge that we've got now is we have to think about how we retain those fans, right? So how do you keep a 6, 7, 8-year-old hooked on Formula One so that they get to an age where they've kind of become an avid fan? How do you keep the diverse demographics that we've got into Formula One now? How do we keep them hooked, right? Because it can't be through the traditional routes, right? You can't sit down and ask a 7, 8, 9-year-old or even a 15, 16, 17-year-old to sit and watch Formula One for 2 hours on a linear feed on a Sunday afternoon, right? They're going to look at you like you've just landed from Mars. So what do you have to do? You have to give them different products that keep them engaged. And I think this is where I think this is where data and insights and technology has such a key role. Because I think Formula One is so, a Formula One event is very, very complex, but you can demystify it quickly through data. The gen whatever it is, like the below 16-year-olds, they want to watch Formula One in 5 minutes. They want to consume it in 5 minutes, right? Which is fine, right? That's just the same as you or I watching it for 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon, right? They'll get as much information as you or I will from watching it, for 5 minutes. But you've got to give them a product where they can watch it for 5 minutes, and you've got to give them a product that they can engage in. So I think that data and technology has a really, really key role to play here. And I would cite that augmented reality is also going to be a key player as well in the future. I think that, forget about, virtual reality. Virtual reality, I think, a sport for me should be a communion of people kind of coming together and celebrating something, whether you're sitting down on the sofa and watching it for for on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, a match or a race or whatever it is. It should be about, there should be some celebration of some level of community to be able to do that. So if you think about VR, everybody kind of went down the VR route, and personally I've always thought it was probably for middle-aged men that still live at home with the mum and play on games. For me, what's much more important is the AR, because you're still in the room with people. You can use augmented reality live at an event. To go to an event and watch Formula One, it's really complex, right? You see these cars going past at 200 mile an hour for 1 hour and 45 minutes on a Sunday afternoon. You've got no idea what happens until the checkered flag comes out and you watch whatever car goes over first, right? So AR has a huge role to play in the live event, if you could bring up data. If you could think about how you could engage the younger fans, unpacking moments in Formula One with AR. I'm talking to somebody now out in California who has done a lot of stuff with Pixar, and we're talking about having like an augmented reality of watching Formula One here, so watching the whole race. So rather than watching the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix on a flat screen, even something which is like 60-inch or something, how about watching it in 3D here with a pair of AR goggles and being able to pause, get hold of the car and rewind it and try and understand what's just happened. So for me, there's lots of different ways that we can use technology and deploy technology to engage the younger audience and the new audience, and we have to start thinking outside the box. It can't be just watching it on a linear feed and thinking that that's going to keep the younger audience, because it won't, right? We're on a hide into nothing. So Formula One has a responsibility now. As I said, it's been somewhat fortuitously, somewhat by design, that we've had this massive influx of new fans and younger fans and a more diverse fan base. But now we really have to work hard as a sport to keep them.
It's so exciting to see, the points that you're mentioning in terms of artificial intelligence, machine learning, neural networks, and now augmented reality, and especially on this, Formula One racing. So thank you, Rob Smedley. It was an absolute honor to have you on our podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.